You're listening to Rolling Recklessly, the podcast where dice hit the floor, paint gets spilled, and no game ever goes exactly as planned. I'm Grizzly, and here we dive headfirst into Warhammer, tabletop gaming, and the beautiful mess that is the hobby life. From epic crits to absolute disasters, we'll cover it all. So grab your minis, roll with me, and let's get reckless. Welcome back to Rolling Recklessly. I'm your host, Robert, aka Grizzly, and today we're diving into one of the most important and fun parts of Age of Sigmar, gameplay and strategy. This episode is all about breaking down how armies play, how to start building your list, how Spearhead can be a test as a bed for new projects, and some beginner strategy tips as I wish I knew when I started out, along with a few common mistakes we all make as new players. Whether you're brand new to the hobby or you've been rolling dice for years, there should be something here for you to take to the tabletop. So grab your dice, set up your minis, and let's get reckless. One of the first things I tell all new players, and something I had to learn myself, is that every army in Age of Sigmar has a core playstyle. You can push your list in different directions, but the foundation is always there. Let's break down some of the big archetypes that you'll see. First, you have aggro and combat armies. These are armies that just want to smash. Think orcs or Khorne. Their game plan is straightforward. Get across the table and start throwing dice. They're fun if you want high energy, fast games where you're always in a fight. Then you have your defensive and attrition armies. On the opposite end, you've got armies like Maggotkin of Nurgle and OC Archbone Reapers. These armies don't care if you hit them because they can soak it up and slowly grind you down. Playing them feels a little less like a sprint and more like a slow, unstoppable wave. You also have your magic domination armies. Some armies live and die by the spell phase. Seraphon, Lumineth, Tzeentch, they fall into these categories. These armies can tilt the game just by stacking buffs, dropping mortal wounds, or shutting down your opponent's spells. They take more finesse to play, but they can control the flow of the game a little more. After that, we have our movement and trickery armies. These are some of my personal favorites since I play Sylvaneth and Gloomspite kits. Sylvaneth especially weren't the easiest army for me at first. They're tricky, teleporting through the wildwoods and striking from unexpected angles. But once I figured them out, they become one of the most fun and deadly armies I've played. It's incredibly satisfying to use the guerrilla tactics and dance around opponents, and then hit them where it hurts the most. And last but not least, you have your mixed arms and toolbox armies. Finally, you've got armies like the Stormcast Eternals or Cities of Sigmars that don't just lock into one playstyle, they have multiple. They have a little bit of everything, some magic, some combat, some tricks, and that flexibility lets them adapt on the fly. My buddy Jesse's Stormcast are a perfect example of this. I've seen him run straight up aggro list, charging in with reclusions and smashing face. I've also seen him deep strike annihilators into my backline and completely flip the game. Stormcast are like a Swiss Army knife. You never know which tool they're going to pull out. Now, why does this matter? Because knowing these playstyles is the first step to building a list you actually enjoy. If you're not a fan of sitting back and waiting, don't pick a grindy army. If you like control and patience, maybe don't start with a full aggro army. Understanding these archetypes is how you connect your personality to your army, and that's where the game really starts clicking and having fun. One of the biggest questions new players ask is always, how do I even start building a list? It can feel overwhelming when you're staring at war scrolls, battle tomes, and points, but the good news is, it doesn't have to get complicated. Here are some basic tips to keep in mind. First, start with your win condition. Every list should answer this. How does the army win? Is it by holding objectives? By overwhelming their enemy with combat? By dominating in the magic phase? Everything else builds around that answer. Second thing, heroes first. Your general and supporting heroes are the backbone of your list. They unlock abilities, support battle lines, and often determine your army's overall play style. Third, you have your battle line backbone. Don't underestimate your battle line. These are the units that usually score points. They're not flashy, but they win games. A bunch of painted heroes looks cool, but it won't mean much if you can't hold objectives. After that, we have our support units. These are your buff givers, debuffers, and utility pieces. They don't always look like much on the table, but they make your heavy hitters work, or save them. Next up, we have your hammer units, most people's favorites. These are your big threats, monsters, elite cavalry, or damage dealers that close out games. One last thing to consider is balance is key. It's tempting to load up on heroes or monsters, but without a backbone, they fall flat. A good list mixes hammers, anvils, and support pieces so everything works together. And one more tip, practice your list. Don't throw it away after one bad game. Sometimes you just need the reps to understand how all the synergies work out. I have a couple of my own lists and examples that I wanted to share today. First off, for the Sylvaneth, this list I like to call Kurnoth today. It revolves around Belthanos and the Kurnoth Hunters. It's supported by spellcasters like the Warsong Rev and some utility strikes from the Revenant Seekers. It plays like a wall of swords backed by teleporting tricks and running and charge shenanigans. The Wildwoods and Belthanos generalship make it feel like a classic guerrilla-style Sylvaneth. Tough to master but deadly once you learn the flow. This list is 2,000 points on the dot, use the Outcast battle formation, and is ready for General's Handbook 2025-2026. It's 2 drops. For the spell lore, I use Lore of the Deepwood. For my manifestation lore, I use the Manifestations of the Deepwood. Battle tactic cards I choose are Scouting Force and Master the Paths. For my General's Regiment, first up is Belthanos. First learner, Kurnoth. He's 350 points and he's my general. Next unit is the Arch Revenant. He's 120 points, equipped with the Acorn of Ages. Then I have 2 reinforced units of Kurnoth Hunters with Great Swords, each 440 points. And then in Regiment 1, I have the Warsong Revenant with the Spellsinger heroic trait, accompanied by a unit of Dryads, and then some Scourge of Gyran Revenant Seekers, also a unit of Tree Revenants for teleportation and capturing objectives. And then with Sylvaneth, you can never leave your Wildwoods at home. I like this list because it lets me take advantage of Belthanos' ability of letting units run and charge. That helps the Kurnoth with the swords not rely on the teleported 9-inch charge. The Spellsinger trait attached to the Warsong Revenant helps ensure important casts go through, just ensuring that those trees make it out there. I win with this list by using my Kurnoth and my Revenant Seekers to run out of my territory, helping me achieve the Scouting Force tactics. It also empowers my Kurnoth with the swords' ability to accomplish by defeating heroes in the Master of Paths battle tactics. My next list is a Seraphon list I like to call Why So Sorious. This one uses the Slan Starmaster as the general with the mix of warriors, Kroxigor, and Agrodon Lancers for punch. The Old Blood on Cornosaur with the Blood Rage pendant is my hammer piece. He's a real centerpiece model that feels great on the table, backed up by the Astrolith Bearer's buffs and the Realm Shaper Engine. This list leans into the Seraphon synergy heavy style with magic support and multiple threats for each working together. This list is 1960 out of 2,000 points. It uses the Sunclaw Star Host battle formation, is 2 drops. For the spell lore, I use the Celestial Manipulations. For manifestation lore, I use the Twilight Sorceries. For battle tactic cards, I use Intercept and Recover and Scouting Forces. For General's Regiment, I have the Slan Starmaster, which is 280 points. He's my general. I have a unit of Agrodon Lancers, unit of Kroxigors, a Skink Star Priest, and then for Regiment 1, I have the Scourge of Gyran Source Old Blood on Carnosaur. He is equipped with the Blood Rage Pendant, the Ancient Defender, and Being of the Stars. I also have this Saurus Astrolith Bearer, and then 2 units of reinforced Saurus Warriors. I also have a Realm Shaper Engine to help buff my back pieces. My keys for victory with this list are planting my Saurus Warriors on objectives, using the Carnosaur with the Old Blood to go out and hunt down units for the Intercept and Recover battle plan. The Warriors and the Lancers really help me achieve the Scouting Force tactic by getting out of territory and holding terrain pieces. Another key part of building lists is thinking about battle tactics. These are your mini objectives during the game, and if your list doesn't have a way of consistently scoring them, you're going to struggle. For example, having units that can teleport, fly, and grab far-off objectives makes a huge difference. Opponents can't leave objectives uncovered. When I'm building lists, I literally ask myself, how am I scoring Scouting Force? How am I scoring Intercept and Recover? If I can't answer those questions, I know I need a tweak in the list. One last recommendation I have for list building is to use apps for making list building easier. Personally, I use the Age of Sigmar app. It's free to download, but there are some limitations. If your army has a battle tome, parts of it are going to be behind a paywall, and with the free version, you can only build one list at a time. If you want to build and save multiple lists, you'll need a subscription to Warhammer Plus. There is also third-party apps and websites out there for building lists. I don't have any personal experience with them, so I can't recommend or review any, but I know that some players prefer them and depending on their interfaces and surface features. At the end of the day though, whatever tool you use, the important thing is that it helps you keep things in your list organized and makes it easier for experimenting with new builds. One of the coolest things about 4th edition is Spearhead. I think it's one of the best ways for both new and veteran players to test out armies. For those unfamiliar, Spearhead is a smaller scale version of Age of Sigmar. You play with a handful of units on a smaller board, and the games run much quicker. But what makes it special is that the armies in Spearhead still pretty much like themselves. Take Sylvaneth, for example. Even in Spearhead, they still play guerrilla fights, zipping around the board, striking at the right moments. Seraphon Spearheads are pretty much the same. You've got the Star Scale Warhost, which is all about big dino smash, and then the Sunblood Prowlers, which makes a mix in mobility and support. Both feel like Seraphon, even in the small format. I've even played around with other Spearheads, and it's been a great way to get a taste of different armies. The Snarlpack Hunters from the Gloomspite Gits are super fast and mobile, but really squishy. They lean on run and charge tactics and some shooting to get the job done, but if you misstep, they crumble fast. On the opposite end, the Bleak Host from the Magakin of Nurgle are the definition of tanky. Every unit has a 5-up ward, and they soak up a ton of damage. They spread diseases just like in the full-size game. Playing them feels like running an unstoppable wall. Another cool feature is how some Spearheads drop in reinforcements later in the game to keep things balanced. For example, Indrasta's Stormcast Spearhead and the Bleak Host Nurgle Spearhead both bring in units in the 3rd round. That staggered arrival adds tension and keeps the game feeling from one-sided too much in the early beginning. That's why I think Spearhead is just such a good test bed. You can get a real feel for an army's playstyle without committing into painting and collecting 2,000 points. It's also a great way to teach friends or to run a quick game at the local shop. So, if you're not sure about your next project or you're still figuring out your playstyle, start with the Spearhead box. It's a low investment, low time commitment, and it gives you a taste of what the army really feels like once you start to scale up. One thing I wish somebody had told me when I first started Age of Sigmar isn't that it isn't just about smashing models together. There are layers of strategy and decision making that really makes the game fun and exciting. Or it can be a really frustrating one. Here are some of my favorite beginner-friendly strategy tips. 1. Know your win condition. Before your dice even hit the table, ask yourself, what does my army need to do to win this game? For Nurgle, it might be surviving and grinding. For Sylvaneth, it might be teleporting onto objectives. For Seraphon, it might be dominating magic and using its synergies. If you don't know your win condition, you'll end up chasing kills that don't even really matter. 2. Deployment matters. Don't just plop your units down. Think about where your buffs need to go, what units need protection, and how you'll screen your big threats. I've lost games just from a sloppy deployment. Leaving a gap for deep strikes and forgetting to protect key heroes is not a good way to start the game. 3. Make sure you're trading smart. It's tempting to throw your best units into a fight right away, but don't waste your elite models on small gains. Keep your hammers alive as long as possible, and use your screens and battle lines to absorb the first wave. 4th, objectives over kills. This one's huge. Age of Sigmar is a game of objectives, not just battles. You could wipe out half of your opponent's army and still lose if you're not scoring points. Always keep an eye on the mission and where those objectives are. I've accidentally ran my units away from the objectives and lost the game for that. 5. Practice your movement. Movement wins games. Tagging units, blocking charges, screening objectives, these little plays make a huge difference. Even just an inch of positioning can flip the momentum of a battle. 6 is going to be turn priority awareness. The priority role at the start of each battle can make or break games. Sometimes taking the first turn is worth it, but remember, by going first, you open yourself up to being double turned later, which can be devastating. Some armies thrive on double turns, while others can weather them a little better. Knowing which category yours falls into is important. 7. Attacker versus defender choice. If you win the role to pick attacker or defender, don't take it lightly. Being the defender means you get to place terrain and choose your side of the board, which can be huge. A well-placed terrain piece can give you cover, block enemy charges, or even create choke points. And last but not least, watch out for deep strikes. During deployment, always keep in mind that if you're going second, your opponent might deep strike you. If you're not prepared with a defensive plan or some screens, a strong deep strike can land you in your backline and ruin your game before it even starts going. I'll say, I've definitely learned some of these lessons the hard way. Playing Sylvaneth taught me that movement is everything, and if you don't position yourself right, your wildwoods don't matter. Your guerrilla tactics just fall apart. With the Gloomspite Gits, I've learned that don't get tunnel vision on kills. Sometimes your goblins were dying left and right, but as long as they clogged up the board and held objectives, I could still scrape out wins. But how about Seraphon? They've shown me how critical it is to plan around synergies. Forget to keep a buff unit in range, suddenly your unstoppable dino isn't so hard-hitting anymore. These tips are simple, but if you keep them in mind, you'll start to see the game in a whole new way. And the best part, the more you practice, the more natural this stuff becomes, until you're not just playing models, you're playing the board, the mission, and the win condition. One of the best ways to improve quickly in Age of Sigmar is to learn from your mistakes, especially the common ones that just happen about every new player. Here are some that I've seen and made myself. 1. Getting tunnel vision on kills. New players often think about wiping out enemy units as the main goal. It's not. If you focus only on kills, you'll lose sight of objectives and missions. 2. Is overextending. Throwing your best unit too far forward without support is a recipe for disaster. Once they're isolated, they're easy to pick off. 3. Would be forgetting your buff ranges. Auras and ranges on abilities matter. I can't count how many times that I've moved a unit out of a range that's critical of a buff and watched my game plan fall to pieces. 4. Would be ignoring the battle tactics. These little objectives add up, and if you're not thinking about them from the start, you'll always be behind on points. 5. Would be bad deployment. A poor setup can lose the game before it even starts. Not screening properly, leaving gaps, or putting fragile heroes in the open are all just beginner's mistakes. 6. Would be not playing the mission. Every battle pack and scenario is different. If you're not tailoring your strategy towards the actual mission, you're just fighting aimlessly. And last but not least is burning out your hammers. It's tempting to throw your biggest, baddest unit into the first fights you can, but if they go down early, you'll have nothing left to finish the job. I've definitely burned out my own hammers too soon before. My Spearhead Dorothy was a monster, but if I throw him in unsupported and he gets dropped before he can even shine, I lose one of my biggest tools. Over time, I've learned to pace myself and save those hammers for when they'll make the biggest impact. Learning from these mistakes instead of repeating them is how you start turning close losses into consistent wins. So that's going to wrap things up for today's episode. I know it's been a long one and we've covered a lot, from different core playstyles of Age of Sigmar to some basic list building with a couple of my own list examples, to how Spearhead is the perfect test bed for trying out new armies, and of course, shared some of my favorite beginner strategy tips and common mistakes that we all make when we first start playing the game. I'd love to hear from you and what your favorite strategies and lessons you've learned from the tabletop. Shoot me a message on Instagram at rollingrecklesslypodcast or send me an email at rollingrecklesslypodcast@gmail.com. I'd be happy to feature some of my favorite stories in future community spotlights. Also, still have the Nerdlings giveaway still running. Make sure you check out my Instagram for the details on how to enter. Thanks for hanging out with me today and spending some time talking Warhammer and strategy. Until next time, may your crits be high, your paint never dry, and your rolls ever reckless.